Okay, let's start now. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Center for Chinese Studies here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, I would like to welcome everyone to our Spring 2025 CCS webinar series. And today's session featured as a CCS faculty dialogue and seminar presentation on the topic Lunar Cycles and Policy Impact, Insights into China's Capital and Corporate Landscape. Our three distinguished panelists today are from the University of Hawaii Scheidler's College of Business, namely Professors Victor Huang, Qianqiu Liu, and Yifan Teng. A fuller introduction of all three speakers will follow after these announcements. My name is Mingbao Yu, and I'm currently serving as the director of the Center for Chinese Studies, which is constituted of 45 professional rank faculty specializing in Chinese studies across 30+ disciplines and professional schools. It is one of the largest such training and research centers in the world outside Asia. The center's mission is to foster interdisciplinary understanding of mainland China, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, as well as diasporic Chinese communities worldwide, and of Chinese civilization and its long connections to Hawaii. I would also like to take this opportunity here to introduce CCS staff that includes Associate Director Dr. Ni Zhang and Academic Support Specialist Ms. Adriana Choi. If you have any logistical questions, please submit them to the Q&A tool because the chat tool is disabled. Please note that this session will be recorded and then uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you can also find previously recorded CCS webinar sessions in case you missed them. Our full CCS webinar program flyer for this semester can be found on our CCS website. The last 30 minutes of today's session will be reserved for the Q&A, and we kindly ask that you use the Q&A tool for submitting your comments and questions to the speakers. Don't wait until the last minute to post your comments. Ask no more than 2 questions and keep them concise so that everyone can be accommodated. As much as possible, questions will be answered in the order they have been submitted, but we might also synthesize or group together similar questions in order to make the best use of our time. We further reserve the right to dismiss comments and questions that are not relevant or civil in tone. After today's session, you will receive a brief survey, and we would greatly appreciate your constructive feedback. And now it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Professor Victor Huang, who in turn will introduce his colleagues, Professors Qianqiu Liu and Yifan Teng. Dr. Huang is a professor of finance at the Scheidler's College of Business here at University of Hawaii at Manoa. He holds a PhD in finance from the Georgia Institute of Technology, and his research focuses on empirical asset pricing, investment management, international finance, Chinese financial markets, and corporate governance. Professor Huang's work has been published in leading finance journals, such as Review of Financial Studies, Journal of Financial and Quantitative Analyses, Journal of International Money and Finance, Journal of Banking Finance, and Journal of Corporate Finance, among others. So without further ado, let me turn over to Professor Huang.
Thank you, Minbao, for your nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce 2 distinguished speakers and colleagues who will be sharing their recent research on Chinese financial markets. So we have first speaker, Dr. Qianqiu Liu. He is the Scheidler College Distinguished Professor of Finance and the Chair of Finance Department at the Scheidler College of Business, University of Hawaii at Manoa. Professor Liu received his BS in Mathematics and MS in Statistics from Wuhan University and PhD in Finance from Kellogg School of Management, Northwestern University. His current research interests are in the areas of empirical asset pricing, financial econometrics, commodities, international finance, and personal financial planning. He has previously published in journals such as Journal of Applied Econometrics, Journal of Banking and Finance, Journal of Empirical Finance, Journal of International Money and Finance, Management Science, and Review of Financial Studies. And our second speaker, is Dr. Yifan Chen. She is an assistant professor of finance and real estate at the Shadler College of Business, University of Hawaii at Manoa. Her research interests lie in real estate finance and economics. She earned her PhD in real estate and finance from the Pennsylvania State University in 2022. Dr. Chen's work has been published in academic journals such as Real Estate Economics, the Journal of Regional Science, and Economic Modeling. She also serves as a referee for various journals, including Real Estate Economics, the Journal of Real Estate, Finance and Economics, the Journal of Corporate Finance, and the China Economic Review. She was awarded Summer Economics Fellowship from the American Economic Association in 2019 and the TRAPE CRE Future Leader Award in 2022. As we all know, since the launch of market reforms and reestablishment of stock markets in the early 1990s, China has provided a distinctive setting for examining both investor behavior and the impact of government policies and regulations. With that, I'll now turn it over to Professor Chen-Qiu Liu.
Okay, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. First, thanks to Dr. Yu and also for your invitation and to Dr. Huang for your introduction. Today, the title of my presentation will be One Country's Two Calendars Examination of China's Asia Stock Market. This is based on my publication with my former student Xiaobo Liang and also Dr. Alan Zabedi from Clarkson University. So this publication is in December 2022, Asian Pacific Journal of Financial Studies. First, let me talk about the calendar, very conventional calendar in China. So on the left side, you will see this calendar is very often in most Chinese families. So this is the New Year, Chinese New Year in 2020. So which is January 25th, according to the solar calendar. However, in this calendar, you will also find Zhengyue Chuyi, which means the Chinese New Year, which is according to lunar calendar. On the right side, you can find most of Chinese, they consider this is a very important, in fact, it's the most important holiday in their life. So many will go back to their hometown to celebrate this New Year with their families. So in the following, so I'm going to talk about the history of these calendars in China. So in fact, for many, many years in China, we actually have used lunar calendar. However, in 1912, so Qing dynasty was dethroned. So at that time, so New Year, in fact, Chinese New Year was celebrated on solar January 1st, just like in Japan. However, this only lasts for 3 years until President Yuan Shikai, he actually renamed lunar January 1st as a Spring Festival in 1914. Between 1914 to 1938, actually, Chinese lunar calendar was abandoned, readopted repeatedly, and until 1938. So finally, both calendars are used in China, and official date, officially, so the dates are recorded in according to solar calendar. But some important holidays, they are actually assigned according to lunar calendar. For example, Chinese New Year, and which is based on the lunar calendar. So we also have others, such like a Qingming Festival and also Dragon Boat Festival and Mid-Autumn Festival. They are all based on lunar calendar. So these holidays are very important, not only in China, it's also important in some East Asia countries and also Southeast Asian countries. Then after this, I'm going to talk about the monthly calendar effect, which is well studied in the international markets. For example, in the US, so it was studied from 1970s. So we actually find, according to the literature, so in January, according to the solar calendar, in many countries, the stock returns are higher, and especially for small stocks. However, in China, there's not solar January effect. So according to some research, so in China, you may find that only in February or in March, stock returns are higher. And all these research, they are based on the solar calendar. But when you think about solar February or March, you may wonder, are these the time for the lunar January? Or maybe in China, there's a lunar January effect. So this is what we focus in this study. So in fact, we are going to do this study based on the lunar January. We use a lunar calendar. We're going to check this directly because all those previous studies, they actually use a solar calendar, so they calculate the returns in those solar months. However, we are going to use a lunar calendar, so try to check whether there's a strong lunar January effect. If there is, so which actually show that the lunar calendar, which as part of the traditional culture, which is very important to Chinese investors. Then from this research, we also try to understand why we have this lunar January effect. So one important question is, if you think about there's like a February or March effect in Chinese stock market, are they equivalent to the lunar January? In fact, they are close, but not exactly, because Chinese New Year, the duration is from January. It always happens between January 21st and February 20th. For example, this year in 2025, our New Year it's in January 29th. And the next year in 2026, the New Year will be on February 17th. So you can see it span about 1 month from late January to mid-February. So over 200 years from 1901 to 2100, so there are 130 years. So the New Year happened in the solar February, but there are also 70 years. So the Chinese New Year start on this actually in the solar January. So in fact, over these many years, you can see the lunar, if you want to check the lunar January effect, a better way is you have to construct the monthly returns in the lunar months. For example, we use the following buy and hold approach. First get the daily returns, then from this, we can calculate a month's return in a lunar calendar. This is not the same as in solar months. Our data is from the SISMA, which is similar as CRISP in the US market. We use A-shares. These are the stocks open to Chinese domestic investor to invest. The stocks are listed in Shanghai Stock Exchange and Shenzhen Stock Exchange. It covers from January 1995 to December 2019, according to solar calendar, which based on the lunar calendar is lunar December 1994 to lunar November 2019. It starts from January 1995 because although Chinese stock market start earlier than this, but it's from January 1995, the sample size larger, which is large enough for this research. So in the following, we first try to repeat some of the research in the earlier studies. For example, we check the monthly returns according to a solar calendar. So we find that indeed, in solar January, there's a lot of January effect because you can see from Shanghai market, a Shenzhen market, a whole market, which combine both of them, according to equal weighted return or value weighted return of this market index, the return, although they are positive, but they are not statistically significant. However, in February, the return is much higher, which are also statistically significant at 1% level. In March, return also pretty high, and most of them also significant, although slightly smaller, lower than in February. And if you compare those returns relative to other months, you will find that in February and in March, those returns are also much higher and typically statistically significant, especially for the equal weighted returns. In the following, we are going to just check the monthly returns in lunar according to lunar calendar directly. On the top line, you find that in lunar January, the stock return for the whole market based on the equal weight is 7.791% in that month on the average. So we have 25 years. So if you check the value weighted returns, this is 4.463% in lunar January. So if you check Shanghai market, Shenzhen market, so you will find all of them are statistically significant at 1% level. In lunar February, many of them, they are also significant. They are significant at 10% level. They are little lower, but compared to other months, you will still find they are higher. So this is confirmed in panel B when we compare lunar January rather than other lunar months, or in panel C if we compare lunar January compared to January in solar calendar. So you would find that lunar January, the stock returns are much higher. In addition, you will also find that just like in US market, there's also a kind of a size effect because you find that if we sort the stocks according to the firm's market cap, from left to right, we have 5 quintile portfolios. So you find that small stocks, they have higher returns. There's a monotonic decreasing pattern. So big stocks, they have lower returns. Although in lunar January, their returns are pretty high, but smaller stocks, their return much higher. You can see the small minus big, which is statistically significant at a 1% level, not only for equal weighted return and also for value weighted return. So we try to check this and also understand why actually in the lunar February, sometimes you also have higher returns. And in lunar January, the return even higher. So we find that it's linked to some very important macroeconomic events, such as 2 sessions, or in Chinese, we normally call this as 两会. 两会, normally they happen in early March, such as March 3rd, March 4th, or March 5th. So over many years, except in 2020 in the COVID period, that year, which is different. In other years, is typically in this early March, from March 3 to March 3rd to March 5, and it often lasts for 7 to 10 days. During 两会, the government will try to promote economy and social stability. So they will announce some policies, so which are normally considered very positive news in stock market. From this table, you will find that when 两会 start in lunar January, So from beta, the effect shows that it's much stronger. So, but when Lianghui starts in lunar February, so you will also find some effect. So see the beta here, but in fact it's weaker if it's not in lunar January. Okay, so this is what we find. So in the following, we try to understand why there's a lunar January effect. In the US and many other markets, there are two hypotheses that are proposed. One is called tax loss selling, another one is called window dressing. Tax loss selling means that investors, they sell these loser stocks before the year end. So they realize these losses to offset capital gains so that they can save the tax. And window dressing means some institutional investor, fund managers, they want to sell these losers, buy these winners so that their portfolio look more attractive to their clients. According to the old literature, so in fact, in the US market, more research support the tax loss selling hypothesis. However, in China, both of them couldn't hold because in China, first, there's not capital gain tax. And also in China, fund managers, although they want to window dress, but they window dress according to solar calendar, not of course based on the lunar calendar. So the lunar January effect couldn't be explained by both hypotheses. So we try to understand what happened. We find that actually in this table here, this beta 2 showed that consumer sentiment in the lunar January. And we find that this in lunar January, it's pretty strong. It's based on, it's also happened that they actually have a larger disposable income in that particular month. And also in the spring period, in the spring festival week, they spend about 40% of their monthly income. And then after that, the invest remaining into the stock market. Then we also find that during this lunar January, in fact, in the stock market, there are higher trading volume because in this table, beta 1 represent the trading in the lunar December, beta 2 represent the trading in lunar December. So we find there's a significant difference. Lunar January, there's a much higher trading volume, especially there are more buy orders. So these buy orders push the stock price, especially for small stocks. So this is why what we can find this lunar January effect. We test this also in B-share market as a comparison because B-share market is also those Chinese stocks, but they are only open to foreign investors, especially institutional investors. Then after February 19, 2001, it was also open to Chinese investors, but only allow them to use US dollars and Hong Kong dollars to invest. So when you compare this A share and B share, you would find that, in fact, for the foreign investors in the B share market, there's a lot of lunar calendar because if you find here for the whole summer period, it's much weaker. And in A share, the lunar January effects are much stronger. Not only this, before this B share was open to Chinese investors, actually, this lunar January effect, as you can see the right side of this table, they are not significant. However, after February 19, 2001, when it was also opened to Chinese investors using US dollars and Hong Kong dollars, there is some weak evidence. There's also this lunar January effect, but it's weaker. So this actually means for A-share market, which is open for Chinese domestic investors, this effect much stronger. So we also did some robustness tests, such as check the before and after financial crisis, and also check the Chinese New Year, whether it's in solar January or solar February. And solar February, it's stronger because it's more likely. So this if it starts in solar February, it would extend to the 2 sessions or 两会 until early March. We also check different samples, different industries. We find lunar January effect is very strong, very robust. So let me conclude. So we find that in China, there's a January effect, but this January effect is based on lunar calendar, not solar calendar, which means actually, so the lunar calendar, which is very important to our Chinese investors and as part of their daily life, is very important for their also investment. And we find that those assumptions, such like tax laws, selling, and window dressing, which are often used to explain the market in the Western or developed market, it doesn't hold in China. Instead, we find a trading pattern, a trading cycle. We show very strong turn of the year effect in trading volume and in buy orders, especially these buy orders push the stock returns, especially for those small firms. Okay, so this is my presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chencho. Thank you. So let's move on to the second presentation. And then after that, we can start Q&A and discussions.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for participating in the webinar. Thank Professor Yue and Professor Huang for your kind introduction. Let me share my slides on my end. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Is the module right? Is it the presenter or?
It is.
Okay, I'll start from here. Yeah.
No, you have to switch back. Before it was correct. Now it's a presenter's view. Yes.
Okay.
Now it's correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Today, I would like to present my work. The topic is on accountability and performance in state-owned enterprises, evidence from China. The project is co-authored with Ji Dongchen and Rui Li Liao from School of Public Policy and Management from Tsinghua University. Why are we focusing our topic on state-owned prices? By definition, SOEs are firms in which state, either central government or local government, will hold at least 50% of the equity, either directly or indirectly. Sometimes firms with fewer ownership by the government can also be regarded as SOEs if the government can appoint managers and leaders of the firms directly. And SOEs are very important. They are considered as the backbone of the Chinese economy. And the combined assets of the centralized assets have reached $12.2 trillion by the end of 2023. And the corporate governance and the regulation for SOEs are always being very hot and a popular topic in finance research. Because the corporate governance of SOEs are very, very important to strengthen the supervision and oversight, regulate the SOEs, contribute to the long-term improved firm performance, as well as the effective allocation of resources, as well as overall economic development. Our research is focused on a policy that is aimed to strengthen the governance of SOE. In 2016, the State Council established a lifelong accountability policy for all the state-owned enterprises managers. What does this policy mean? Through this policy, any SOE manager who violates regulations, causes the loss of state assets, or cause any other serious adverse consequences may held legally liable for their lifetime. This is a very important and significant policy because it means a strengthen for the corporate governance in SOE, and the SOE manager will face very severe penalties and punishment if they violate or cause any asset loss. Give you some details about the policy. In this policy, it identifies several categories of violations and misconduct, and the related punitive measures include organizational sanctions, financial penalties, as well as legal proceedings. And this policy is a very critical step in the SOE oversight and improve corporate governance. Actually, it reflects China's broader efforts in the recent years to modernize the SOEs and enhance operational quality. In detail, the enforcement of the policy is actually by a government body which is under the State Council. It's called State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission. We call them SASAC. SASAC is the government body that actually implement, execute, and enforce this lifelong accountability policy. And SASAC can be categorized into central SASAC and local SASAC. And for all the SOEs can also be divided into central SOE as well as a local SOE, which means that the state-owned enterprises is owned by local governments. So for the specific implementation, all the SOEs will facing auditing and regulations by either a central SASAC or a local SASAC. And what does our paper do? This policy gives us a great natural experiment setting to us to evaluate the effectiveness of this policy. And in this paper, we are trying to answer the question that what is the effective of the lifelong accountability policy on SOE's corporate governance and performance in China. And the 2016 lifetime accountability policy is a great natural experiment setting. We can use all the SOEs which are impacted by the policy as treatment group, and the rest of the market, those non-SOE firms, as control groups. And we're going to do a deep method to evaluate the effectiveness of the policy. What do we find? To give you a preview, we find that this lifetime accountability policy significantly reduces violations and misconduct. And it's related with improved firm profitability and performance, and the innovation activity and ability maintain stable for the SOEs. How do we contribute to the current literatures? First, our paper is aimed to contribute to the role and design of accountability in corporate governance. Accountability is very important in firm, and actually the design of the accountability will affect the effectiveness of the corporate governance. So our paper looks at the lifelong accountability design and showing its effectiveness in the firm and corporate governance. And second, our paper is also trying to contribute to the existing literature about SOEs and corporate governance reforms for SOEs. There are a lot of great papers focusing on the SOEs in China or in other countries. And the corporate governance is always a very important topic for the finance studies. And our paper is to provide a new empirical evidence to showing a new mechanism, a new policy that can effectively for the SOEs to reduce the violation and the misconduct, as well as maintain or improve their financial performance. Our empirical study covered the period of from 2012 to 2021, and the implementation time of the policy is in 2016. So we have the example before and after the implementation of this policy. What are included in our analysis are all the firms which are A-share firms on the main board markets of Shanghai and Shenzhen Stock Exchange. And SOEs are treatment group and non-SOEs are control group. So we're going to look at the difference performance or divergence of the performance for the SOEs compared to those control non-SOE firms, and before and after the implementation of the policy. And how do we find out the violation? So the violation information is reported by the China Securities Regulatory Commission, CSRC. CSRC will report all the violations for the public listed firms in China, and those misconduct and violation is not just related to stock market performance, but also related to any other regulatory violations. And the violation information is from the SISMA, China Stock Market and Accounting Research database. This database records for each public traded firms in China how much a public violation is announced by the CSRC. And we know that the SOE and non-SOE, they will be very different in terms of the firm size, in terms of the institutional and the government, and even the board, the structure of the board. So we try to control as many as variables as we can, including their firm characteristics and the financial reporting, just to prevent any firm characteristics difference that may bias our findings. And those variables are from the SISMA and CCER databases. To give you a very quick look at the composition of our sample, as you can see that in our data is at the annual level because the violation reporting is at the annual frequencies. And in our example, the SOE takes about 30 to 35% of the total sample. And for the number of violations, as you can see, the averagely, there are more violations for non-SOEs versus SOEs. And when we are looking at the trend, as you can see that there's a little pickup of the violations from 2012 to 2016. And since 2016, when the policy, the lifetime accountability policy was implemented, you can see a decrease actually for the violations for the SOEs, but not for the non-SOEs. So this is just for a very quick look at the violation, and we don't control any variable, and we don't statistically or empirically test that. It's just a very raw trend. And this is the summary statistics. Here list all the firm characters we use as control variables in our analysis. It includes all kind of board size, meeting numbers as institutional variables, as well as all financial related and performance related variables such as asset, Tobin Q, stock turnover, all those variables. We will all control those differences, those variables to control for the difference between our treatment and control groups. We use a diff-in-diff method. Our left-hand side variable is Y, the number of violations by firm I in period or in year T, and regulation equals 1 if the year is after 2016 and 0 before 2016. And SOE is our treatment group, and the non-SOE is used as our control group. And we control firm institutional and performance related variables. And we use firm fixed effect and year fixed effect. The standard errors are clustered at firm level. First, we look at whether the implementation of the accountability policy will reduce the firm violation. As we can see here that we use different specification for controls, fixed effect, and look at the fourth column, we can see that after the implementation of the policy, the SOEs are significantly reducing their violations compared to our control non-SOE firms. It shows the effectiveness of regulating firm behavior and firm violations after this policy. And we are interested in whether this decrease is whether this trend also happened before the policy. So next, we use a dynamic diff-in-diff method to look at the trend, to plot the difference in the trend between our treatment and control groups. And here, as you can see that before the policy, actually, we do not see a significant difference between the SOE and non-SOEs. But after the policy, which the policy is exactly aimed at regulate SOEs, but has no impact on our control groups, we can see a decrease in the violation for our SOE firms. And it maintains and stays consistent and a decreasing a negative coefficient from 2017 to 2021. But we do see a little bit pick up after 2019. The 2019, we can see a pick up actually from 2020 and 2021. This might be due to the COVID period when the business activities are or be diminished and reduced during that period. And next, we are interested in whether any reduce in the violation is at the cost of firm profitabilities, because sometimes the violation might just be a negative negative externalities for the market, because the firm is trying to be more profitable, to have more business activities. So if that's the case, we might see that the firm's profitability or the firm may be compensated due to more regulated activities. Actually, that's not the case. As we are showing in this table, we use two measures to indicate firms' profitability. One is the ROA, return on asset, which measures the effectiveness of using assets, and ROE, which means the return on equity, stands for whether the firm is creating values for equity holders. We will see that after the policy, the SOEs are increasing in ROA and ROE compared to the non-SOE firms. And the decrease in the previous showing slides, that the decrease in the violation is not coming out at the cost of reducing firms' performance and profitability. How about innovation? We use two measures. One is the research and development expenditures. And we also look at the total number of patents that filed by the firms to measure the innovation activity and research ability for the firms. We do see a negative coefficient in the innovation, but they are non-significant. And next, we would like to measure whether there's any spillover effects of this policy. We all know that this policy is enforced only at the SOE level, but it could be that some firms, they have high correlation with SOE, or they are the business partners of SOEs. So once the SOEs performance or business is being regulated, those business partners may also be regulated or may be required by the SOEs to be more disciplined. So we look at firms. We look at the firms which are the top 5 suppliers for SOE firms, and we identify those firms as high SOE connection firms. And we assume that if there's spillover effects of the accountability policy, then those high SOE connection, those have high business relation and business partner firms will be impacted by this policy greatly than the rest of other firms. In this table, we are showing the results. Actually, we do not see any reducing in the violations for those high SOE connection firms. And we only find a significant decrease in the violation for the SOE firms. So from this analysis, so far, we do not find any spillover effects from the accountability policy. And next step, we look at how effective is this policy in reducing violation of minor violation versus severe violation. We categorize violation into 2 categories. One is the minor violation, which includes official warning, public criticism, public condemnation. And the rest will be considered as severe violations, such as monetary fines, penalties, forfeit of illegal gains, any restrictions on market entry, and revocation of business license. They are more severe punishment. And we are looking at that the policy is more effective at reducing minor violations, but not at the severe violations. One explanation for that is actually for all the violation announcement by the CSRC, the majority will be minor violations, and the severe violation is actually very few. And we do not find a lot of observations for severe violation. Next, we're looking at whether the firm size will be impacted, will impact the effectiveness of the policy. The reason is that we know that for a lot of SOEs, if there are like big firms, then the local governance will trying to protect those firms. If this firm is a big and a major local tax contributor, then the local government will try to protect the firm. And sometimes in some province, if the province is at a high economic growth, then the local government will trying to protect the firms more in order to maintain the economic growth and to maintain those tax contributors. And if that happens, then it's going to weaken the effectiveness of the policy. In order to investigate that assumption, we look at interact the regulation and SOE with the local GDP growth rate, as well as looking at the firm's asset, the firm's size. And we do not find any difference of the effectiveness of policy in terms of province difference or the firm size. So even in high economic growth area, or for those firms which are major tax contributor for local government, the policy is still effective. We still see a significant decrease in the violations after the policy implementation in 2016. To conclude, the lifetime accountability policy significantly reduced violation, especially in minor violations, and this reduction doesn't come at cost of firm performance. The firm still exhibit improved profitability as well as stable levels of innovation. And the findings are robust across various checks, highlighting the policy's effectiveness. These results offer practical implications for strengthen the corporate governance and more modernization reforms in SOE in China. Thank you very much for your time. I'm looking forward to questions and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Yifan, and thank you, Chen-Qiu. So let's move on to questions. Are there any questions from the audience? So we actually look at the questions here. Okay, so far no questions. Okay, so I guess we can just open up for some discussions, and both topics are very interesting. The first one covers the calendar, the January effect on the stock market, but in this case, the Chinese stock market provides a very good out-of-sample study for this so-called the January effect. In the US, there's a January effect, and some people attribute that to the tax implication, because people sell in December and buy in January just to realize the loss in December to get some tax benefit. So obviously China provides kind of evidence that showing that it is not the tax. So so I'm wondering the solar March effect. So you find some significance in the March effect, and of course solar February would be equivalent to the solar the lunar February would be equivalent to solar February. But why do you see some March effect in your study? Do you have any explanations?
Okay, Victor. So let me explain this issue. It's because, as I mentioned, there are two important conferences, right? So they are called in English 2 sessions or in Chinese 2会. These two conferences, they start either on March 3rd for one of them, another one on March 5th. It often lasts for 7 to 10 days. Although it's in early March, however, if a Chinese New Year starts in February, because remember we are talking about a monthly effect. The lunar month on average is about 29.53 days. So it can last to cover the early March. So it's also included. So this is why you will find that if these 2 sessions or 2会, if it's in start in lunar January, so actually, so the effects are much stronger. Otherwise, if the Chinese New Year start in like if 2会 start in lunar February, you could also find there's some good effect, a positive effect. However, it's a little bit weaker. So it's just combined. So it's driven by investors' sentiment, more behavior issues, right? But if it's boosted by policy encouragement, so the impact will be much stronger in the Chinese market.
Thank you. And another question, perhaps some audience also wondering, we know that in China, we have this domestic A shares for the domestic investors, and also some companies also issue B shares for those investors who have US dollars or Hong Kong dollars, depending on which stock exchange to invest in. So mostly foreign investors will invest in B share market. So do you observe any also this monthly effect for the B share market as well?
A very nice question, because in our study, our sample allow us to observe this, and also as a comparison to the A-share market. As you know, A-share market is open for Chinese domestic investors, right? So B-share market is open to foreign investors. However, so according to the new rule starts effective in February 19, 2001. So even B share market is also open to Chinese investors, but has to invest it in US dollars and Hong Kong dollars. So we checked the monthly effect. We found that actually, so before this rule, when it was only open to foreign investors in the B share market, so there's no general effect. However, after that, so when Chinese investors can also invest, indeed, so in the lunar January, so there's some effect because the monthly returns are significantly positive at 10% level. It's weaker compared to the A-share market, but there is, because Chinese investors are also allowed to invest in B-share market.
Okay, very interesting. Okay. I have a couple of questions for Ivan. So in your study, do you observe any heterogeneity in policy impact across different provinces?
Yes. We look at different provinces at two levels. One is that different province will have different marketization level. Some province will be more commercialized, more marketization. And we also look at the legal environment for the provinces. For some provinces, it will have a better legal institutional environment and better legal implementation quality. And we find that the policies will be more effective in reducing the violation of SOEs in those provinces which are not highly marketization and not have a good legal institutional quality. So which means that if in those provinces that where it's already very marketization, marketized and will have already very good at implementation regulations and have better and higher legal environment index, then then we can see that the violation for those firms will already be regulated even before the policy. So the policy will have a stronger effects, a stronger impacts in those provinces, and mostly will be in the Western provinces that we can see a bigger and major reduce in the violation for SOEs after policy. Excuse me, Huang, you are muted.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. So your study find that the government regulation, this new policy is more effective for the companies with weaker corporate governance environment. So that's actually very interesting. And also, do you observe any heterogeneity in policy impact across different SOE industries? So are there industry effect, for example?
Yes, for the industry heterogeneity, the fact is that actually the SOEs are very concentrated in a few industries, such as utility, transportation, energy. So actually for the industry, we do not find a lot of difference, heterogeneity across industry. The main reason, as I mentioned that, because they are very clustered, SOE are very clustered in certain industries.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, so are there any questions from the audience?
I actually have a question,
Okay.
if I may, and I need to apologize because I'm not anybody who understands a lot of finance. I'm actually in the humanities, but I found these two talks really very fascinating because they give us a really good insight into the specificity of what's happening in China. So both of your case studies are very localized, I assume, and and present good case studies from China. And it seems to have worked in both cases. So my question would be, what are there any lessons, other countries can learn from these practices? For example, I mean, I found Professor Liu's talk very fascinating because I've never knew about this connection, what he called the solar energy and market and stock exchange. So do you think, are there any lessons to be learned from for other countries, right? From what you've presented in your case studies. For example, e-funds, this policy, which accountability, which I also thought was really interesting, right? And quite necessary. So have other countries done that? Is there anything they can learn, actually, right? Despite the fact that your case studies are very localized. So that's my question. And it's probably very naive, but it's from somebody who's kind of interested in that, but doesn't understand all the intricacies of fiscal, theories and so on. So that's my question.
Thank you, Dr. Yu. Not at all. I think your question actually is important. When we work on this, we are thinking about the culture. So as you know, Chinese New Year right now in many countries also called the Lunar New Year, right? So
Right.
also observed in like other Asian countries, such
Right.
as like in Korea, such as in Vietnam. So I guess in their market, although I didn't do, but it's easy. We can get the data from their market because in Korea, in Vietnam, they do also have their own stock market. I think they also probably have very strong lunar January effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is my guess. I think to investors, this is important because think about if you want to buy stock, you actually know what's the best timing to invest. And also, if you invest at that time, what kind of firms, small firms, large firms. So this also has implications on your investment strategy.
Mm-hmm. But not for Western countries, right? I mean, there are a lot of Asian people living in Western countries.
Indeed. Because in US and other Japan markets, because they follow the solar calendar, they do have their own January effect, but it's a solar January.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Ifan.
Yeah. For my research, the implication can be applied to a lot of countries which have a higher presence of SOEs, because not all the countries will have SOEs. Usually more developed countries will have less presence of SOEs. But for the other countries such as like Russia, India, Brazil, Vietnam, where like the SOE is dominated in certain industry or has a huge presence in the country, then the accountability policy will definitely have implications for the corporate governance for those countries. And furthermore, because accountability is one corporate governance method, so it not just apply to SOE, actually it can also have implications for all the firms in terms of the corporate governance.
Okay, good. Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? Are there any other comments or concerns? Okay. Professor Huang, do you have any more questions?
At the moment, I don't have any more questions, and we'll see if any questions from the audience.
Okay, we have one question. I see.
I do not see the questions here.
Okay, the question is from our colleague, Professor Zhou Jian. Okay. For the lunar effect, is there any time series pattern? For SOEs, what mitigating mechanisms are available? So the question, we also put it in the chat. You can see, right?
Okay.
And we can actually promote Professor Zhou Jian to speak if he wants. Let me see.
So the first question is for Chencho, and second question is for Ivan.
Right.
Thank you, Professor Zhou Jian. So for your question, our sample starts from January 1995 to the end of 2019. Because the return we check actually is average monthly return. In this sense, we didn't check the time series pattern. And also because the sample period is still long enough for you to check this time series pattern. However, there are also some research in the literature. They study the returns within a month, which is different from us because we compare different months. They study, for example, according to lunar calendar, within the month, could you find some differences? So the result showed that it's typically on the new moon, those days, the returns slightly higher than in the full moon. So of course, this is also related to some behavior issue, investors' sentiment, all those behavior studies, they could share some evidence with us. So this is my answer to Professor Jian Zhou's question. In general here, so our sample in terms of lunar January, because we only have 25 years, 25 lunar January. So in that, we couldn't just identify some time series pattern from this.
Okay, so there's also one for Ivan, right?
Yes.
The question is for SOEs, what mitigating mechanisms are available? If I understand correctly, the main question is that what's the mechanism behind the reducing in violation and improved corporate governance? Actually, that's a great question. I think that's could also be like one something that we should do in this paper is to investigate what's behind why there's a what caused the effective of the policy. The possible mechanism can be that one can be improved in the communication within the firms or the manager just being more disciplined because they will be afraid that they will have lifetime punishment. For a lot of the managers in SOEs, they are all political related actually. They are not just care about their career in this firm, but they are also thinking about their future careers in promotion in the political or in the government or even in the parties. So because of this threatening of lifetime accountability, so they are more disciplined. And also in terms of the improved profitability of the firms and innovation, those stuff, I think we should look at like more details about for example, look at the compensation for the executives or the cost and the management cost for the firms to see whether there's more detailed and more granular evidence about what is actually improved the performance of the firms.
Professor Zhou, let me add a little bit, because in our research, we did a robustness check. We actually use financial crisis 2008 to divide our sample. So we have before and after, which is just about in the middle. So actually, the evidence showed that, which is not included in my slide today. So in the lunar January, the effect is even stronger with the time, because before the financial crisis 2008, the lunar January return is about 5.8%. But after, it's 9.948% in lunar January after the 2008.
Okay. So any more questions? Professor Huang, do you have any final words that you want to share, or
Well, both studies, are very interesting. So I guess echoing the question from Professor Zhou, in China, so we know that the CEOs for SOE or for non-SOE, they are actually from different pool, and the mechanism is quite different. So SOE, the CEOs are appointed by the government, whereas non-SOEs, there's perhaps a market for corporate management, and so they are basically from a different selection process. So we can actually see that this government policy works really good for the SOEs, but not for the non-SOEs. So that kind of shows the different impact. So it's very interesting. And both studies provide a very unique setting, looking at the different impact, one focusing on the investors' behavior and the other focusing on government regulations and policies. Okay, and we learned quite a bit from the study.
I agree. Professor Liu and Yifan, final words, final comment before we close the session.
I first thank you very much for this very valuable opportunity to share my research with all of our audience. I think Chinese stock market is important, not only because China's economic side, right? Also because Chinese stock market has displayed something quite unique. As many of you, if you check or if you invest in Chinese market over many years, it didn't do very well, because there are some important research show there's long-term poor performance. There are many reasons. So there's still many research topics, not only important for us as researchers, but it's also important for many of you. Even you are not in this profession, you try to read, try to study, because they are also important for your own investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yifan?
Yes, as China is one of the country that has dominated presence, a high presence of SOE. So any reforms in the SOE in China can have wide implications for the rest of the world. And as China is trying to more modernize the governance and the performance of the SOE and the long-term growth of firms, I think there could be more and more research and interesting findings in this topic. And I really appreciate the opportunity for the Center for Chinese Studies for me to present this paper. And I really also appreciate the great discussions with Professor Huang, with Professor Liu, as well as the audience. And thank you very much.
Great. Okay, so before we close our session today, I would like to announce our next CCS webinar that will take place next Wednesday, April 23rd, and is featured as an interregional panel discussion on the topic early 20th century history of Manchuria, with speakers from Purdue University, Hokkaido University, and the University of Tokyo. And the session will be moderated by Professor Wensheng Wang, who is a professor in the Department of History here at University of Hawaii at Manoa. So to conclude our session today then, please join me, everyone, in a virtual applause and to thank our three panelists today for their very informative presentation, insightful comments, and very engaging dialogue during this last Q&A session. Many thanks as well to our audience for your attendance, for your comments and questions, and please remember to fill out the short survey. So until our next webinar next week, April 23rd, have a good day and goodbye.